G is for Good Evening Ulster. Much of the history of the 70s in Northern Ireland is a record of death and destruction. But towards the end of that dark decade, a new news programme emerged that mixed the hard news of the day with local feature stories and celebrity interviews. It was fronted by UTV's Golden Girl.
The idea and the philosophy was, of course, that we would give the news what it was worth that day. Because really, by the sort of, middle, now going towards late 70s, people were getting a bit fed up with the news always having to be filled with bombs, bullets and barricades. If it's worth 45 minutes of the hour, we'll give it that. If it's only worth 10 minutes of the day, we'll give it that. And the remainder of the programme we'll fill up with current affairs, film stories, involvement from the public, entertainment. And then that was the beginning also of these big names arriving live on Good Evening Ulster.
In fact, really what I want to do is, will you marry me?
Definitely.
You see, the people are sick of seeing the same old thing on television. Really. I love you.
We got the big stories of the day, and although, for example, the DeLorean situation would have been a news story night after night after night, the employment of people, DeLorean coming to Northern Ireland in the first place, the making of the car, paper designs of the car, we got the first car, the first time anybody had seen the DeLorean on television, we got it.
The gull-wing doors. Maybe you just like to...
Into the living rooms of Northern Ireland viewers came the biggest names in many categories, from news to showbiz.
There are just so many memories, but probably the Elton John one really stands out, because Elton John was visiting and doing a concert, I think probably at Queen's University at the Whitla Hall, and he was doing nothing, absolutely nothing. But there was something in my soul that just said, I want to get this interview. And I actually bribed a waiter in the Europa Hotel to go to his door and beg him to do this interview and to please explain to him that this was like the top programme to do. And much to our surprise, but great pleasure, he said he would do it.
Oh, well, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Fiona, happy birthday to you, there you go. Fiona? Happy birthday, Fiona.
For a newcomer to the programme, himself a future top name on UTV, the first encounter was daunting.
I watched Gloria Hunniford like a hawk. Gloria was one of the most professional people I've ever worked with, and I studied the way she did it. I have to say now, Jackie Fullerton and I were terrified of Gloria, absolutely terrified. She was like a head mistress. And each night we would go down to her dressing room downstairs and we would have our little introduction for our film that we had made that day. And we would hand it in as if we were handing it in to the headmaster, and Gloria would correct it for us, and she would go, no, put that sentence down there and take that sentence up there and change that word. And we would go, yes, miss, and we would take it out and go and change it. So Jackie and I used to laugh at each other, but we were terrified of her.
But Jackie Fullerton's most memorable moment of terror was prompted by someone else. Gloria wasn't available to interview one of the guests one evening, so it was Jackie who had to take on the mighty wrestler, Giant Haystacks.
And if you ask me, has it been...
That happened, I believe, in January 1980, so that's 29 years ago. And I still, to this day, when I go to football matches, Windsor Park, the Oval, Seaview, wherever, Jackie, where's Giant Haystacks? They have never forgotten that.
Nice to see you. It's been 10 years.
Has it been 10 years?
He really was 45 stone, a massive man, and near enough 7 feet tall. So I'm doing the interview like this. And at the end, last question, I say, well, and I was to take, Mr. Giant, I was to take this off, and he was supposed to lift me and lift me above his head, so I'm now 10 feet in the air, twirl me around, and then lay me in gently. This is like a new throw or technique that he had. All he did was grab me by the trousers, so I'm 10 feet in the air, and he just pitched me in. So I wasn't ready, so I couldn't tighten. And I hit the floor like a rag doll. But I remember I could hardly speak out. The breath was completely knocked out of me, even though the cameras were still rolling, and I says, oh.
Thanks very much, Mr. Oh, my pleasure.
When Gloria Hunniford left the programme for London, she was succeeded by a young presenter who was also destined to make it big across the water.
Eamon was the blue-eyed boy at the time. I had just finished Good Evening Ulster, and after Good Evening Ulster, when Gloria left, I thought I could be in with a chance of presenting this. Not a bit of it. They brought in this young fella who was doing farming, for goodness sakes. I hardly even knew who he was. He was 21, he was good-looking, he was talented, and we hated him. And he jumped in front of me and Gillespie and Fullerton, a lot of us, and he was given the job. He was the youngest anchorman in the ITV region at the time, and he was a really, really good presenter.
I should never have got that job. I mean, I was far too young and far too inexperienced, but I suppose I was cocky enough to think that, well, what are you going to do? You're going to turn this down, Eamon? You know, of course you're going to do this. I mean, I certainly wasn't the finished article by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd actually got a job now that ever since in my broadcasting career would have been very, very hard to equal.